Let us start with a prayer. Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Lokashankaram Sutra Bhashya Pranetaro Vedantabja Prabhakaro Vande Parasparatmana Ubadara Yana Shankaro. Very good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome. I am Manu Kashyap from Advaita Academy. Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Niranjan Sahaji, who will be speaking about Bhakti in Advaita Vedanta as part of this Weekend with Wisdom. Dr. Sahaji is currently working as an assistant professor at the Department of Philosophy, Kaliachak College, University of Gaurbanga, West Bengal. He has completed his PhD in 2014 from Department of Religions and Philosophies, School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London, on the topic Philosophy of Advaita Vedanta according to Madhusudana Saraswati's Gudhartha Deepika. Today, Niranjanji will be addressing the charges of other theistic Vedantins like Ramanuja, Madhva, Vallabha, etc. against the Advaitins that the latter's basic principles cannot accord any place to devotion, that is bhakti. So, Niranjanji will be shedding light on this debate with special references to Madhusudana Saraswati's works, who is an uncompromising defender of Shankara's non-dualistic Vedanta and also a foremost advocate of the inclusion of devotion within the Advaita system. Viewers, if you have any questions, please post it in the Q&A box. Niranjanji will be taking up those questions towards the end of the session. Niranjanji, please start your session.
Namo Guruve Namaha. Okay. I'm thankful to the Advaita Academy for giving me this opportunity. Today and tomorrow, we'll be shedding light on a very a highly debatable topic in the field of Advaita Vedanta, that is Bhakti in Advaita Vedanta, quote and unquote. That means if the principle of Advaita Vedanta, the basic principles of Advaita Vedanta, can accord any place to devotion or bhakti. While discussing this topic, we'll be referring to the very term, the etymology of the very term bhakti and the presuppositions of the very term bhakti and the basic principles of Advaita Vedanta. And then we'll be referring to the works of Shankara. Of course, we'll be referring to the Rig Veda, where we find the reference to bhakti, which is also a basic testimony to Advaitic thought. That means starting from the Rig Veda and to Shankara and his post-Shankara Advaitins, we'll be saying that the place of bhakti is very much there in all these works. So what we'll be doing, as I just mentioned, we'll be giving the etymology to the very term bhakti and the basic presuppositions of Advaita Vedanta. Then we'll be seeing how the very notion of bhakti can be accommodated to this Advaitic field. So let me just discuss one by one the point. Of course, I should mention that in conclusion, we'll be just referring to Madhusudana Saraswati and his works briefly in order to substantiate our arguments. Contrary to the charges of other theistic Vedantins like Ramanuja, Madhva, Vallabha, etc., against the Advaitins that the latter's basic principles cannot accord any place to devotion or personal godhead. We find reference towards Shiva Upasana, devotion, not only in the Rig Veda, which bears the earliest testimony of Advaitic thought, but also in the works of Shankara and many of his followers like Sureshwara, Sarvabhagatman, Vidwaranya, Madhusudana Saraswati, Brahmananda Saraswati, Narayana Tirtha, etc. While referring to the presuppositions of the very term bhakti, devotion, and the Advaita Vedanta in brief, we'll be shedding light on this debate with a special reference to Madhusudana Saraswati, who belongs to around 16th century C, an uncompromising defender of Shankara's non-dualistic Advaita Vedanta, and the foremost advocate of the inclusion of devotion within the Advaitic system. So first, let me give the etymology of the term, very term bhakti, or devotion. The term bhakti is derived from the dhatu or verbal root bhaja. Bhaja means worship plus tin uttaya as a suffix. The term is derived like bhaja plus tin. It comes to the bhakti. So then now let me say the presuppositions of bhakti. As I mentioned, the very term Advaita, non-dualism, shows that it is non-dual. It is comprehensive. So, but contrary to this view, we see the very term etymology, the very term bhakti, the etymology of bhakti shows that the duality inheres. So let me see the presuppositions of the term bhakti first. We'll see, in order to have bhakti, or when the concept of bhakti devotion arises in your mind, there should be certain presuppositions. Number one, we may say the object of devotion, the supreme Godhead, endowed with auspicious qualities. It should be the first presuppositions, okay, in terms of bhakti. Number two, devotee. There should be a devotee, there should be the presence of devotee who is inferior to the object of devotion and who seeks the grace and mercy of the Godhead, that is personal God. Then we see devotion, that means the attitude of the devotee towards the object of devotion. Devotion is nothing but the attitude to the object of devotion, that is the, personal God, Godhead. Then devotion, it is a means of attaining liberation, but some consider it to be superior to liberation, as is referred to in the Bhagavata Purana. As we know, the Bhagavata Purana is the basic or the fundamental testimony to the concept of devotion, where it is even said that devotion is superior to liberation. It is mentioned there, and we can say the Bhagavata Purana 3:29:13, it is referred to. Then we'll see the different types of devotion admitted in relevant literature. As I mentioned, the Rig Veda, which is the earliest testimony to Advaitic thought, in Rig Veda also, the presence of devotion is there. It refers to devotion. And devotion is referred to in the works of Shankara and even in the post-Shankara, Shankarite Advaitins too. So we see the different types of devotion admitted in relevant literature. The first, there is enormous literature available on devotion since Rigvedic times, a few of which are just we can mention here. First, let me discuss, let me refer to the Bhagavata Purana. We'll be seeing in the Bhagavata there are some, important places where, the devotion is referred to explicitly. Though, of course, the entire Bhagavata Purana deals with devotion in different angles. The Bhagavata Purana 126 to 1267, we see devotion is of two types. The first one is the highest goal to be achieved in life, which is mukha or primary, is shraddha or parabhakti. In the first type of devotion in the Bhagavad Purana is parabhakti, which is shraddha, and that means which is mukha or primary. That is the highest goal to be achieved in life. Number two, devotion is also a means, it is a means of attaining the highest goal in life. That means in the first context, it is the shraddha, that means it is the object to be achieved in life. And then number two, in the second context, it is the means of attaining the highest goal in life. That means in the first context, it is the mukha in the primary sense. In the second context, it is being used in the guna or secondary sense, where it's a means of attaining the highest goal in life. That is guna or secondary or sadhana or aparabhakti. Bhagavad Purana 7.5.23 refers to 9 forms of devotion. First one is listening to the glory of Vishnu, Savana, singing the praise of him, Kirtana, contemplating him, Smarana, offering ovations to his feet, Padashavana, worshipping him with offerings, Archana, singing his laudation, Bandhana, feeling dependence on him as a servant, Dasya, making friendship with him, Shakha, and surrendering oneself completely to him, Atmanivedana. So we find in Bhagavad Purana 7.5.23, there are 9 types of devotion. Okay. The next one, then another text is called Narada Bhakti Sutra. As you know, the Narada Bhakti Sutra is also another compendium on bhakti. In the Narada Bhakti Sutra 82 mentions devotion, though in itself one only, though devotion is itself one, it manifests in 11 form. Like we can discuss this way chronologically. Love for glorifying divine qualities. This is Guna Mahatma Shakti. Now, the first one is devotion is considered to be the love for glorifying divine qualities. That is Guna Mahatma Shakti. Number two, love of divine beauty. Devotion is also considered to be a love of divine beauty. It's a Rupa Shakti. Then love of worship, it has Pujaka Shakti. Love of constant remembering him, Smarana Shakti. Love of service, Dasya Shakti. Love of taking him as friend, Shakha Shakti. Then love of taking him as a son, Vatsalya Shakti. Then love of him as that of a wife, Kanta Shakti. Love of self surrendered to him, Atma Nivedana Shakti. Love of complete absorption in him, Tanmayata Shakti. And love of the pain of separation from him, Parama Viraha Shakti. So this is just we saw in the Narada Bhakti Sutra. In Narada has discussed, has given 11 forms of devotion. That means you can say is the power of devotion or how devotion works in different angles, in different forms. Then we'll be referring to another compendium on bhakti, that is the of course Bhagavad Purana, as interpreter of Bhagavad Purana is called Bapadeva. Bapadeva also has interpreted Bhagavad Purana, and according to him, devotion is of 2 types. First is Vihita, which are, this kind of devotion is enjoined by scriptures. And the number 2 is Vihita. First one is Vihita, that means which is enjoined, which is accepted by the scriptures. And the number 2 is Vihita, which is not enjoined, not sanctioned by the scriptures. So Vihita is of 2 types. Is a Shuddha, that means pure, and then Misra, which is mixed. Then again, Avihita kind of devotion is also of 4 types. Kamaja, that means through desire. Then Deshaja, through aversion. Bhayaja, through fear. Snehoja, through affection. Misra, again, Misra is of 3 types. As I mentioned, the first one, Vihita, is of 2 types, Shuddha and Misra. Then Shuddha is of 4 types, Kamaja, Deshaja, Bhayaja, Snehoja. Now, Misra Bhakti is also of 3 types. First one is Gyana Misra, mixed with knowledge. Number 2, Karma Misra, mixed with action. Then Karma Gyana Misra, that is mixed with action and knowledge. So, in Bhagavad Purana, I mean, as per Bhapadeva, then we see in the concept of bhakti also, the presence of Gyana is very much there. We'll be just coming to this point to shed light on this debate whether in Advaitic principle bhakti can be accommodated or not. When you see the presence of dualism in the very notion of devotion, as I mentioned, the very term devotion shows the presence of duality, which seems to be simply contrary to the basic principle of Advaita Vedanta. Thus, all these concepts underlying the concept of devotion presuppose some basic difference between the devotee and the object of devotion. So, the very term devotion shows there must be duality. That means there must be somebody who shows devotion to something. That means there must be an object to whom the devotee shows devotion, the devotee worships. That means there are duality, that is duality, the devotion. That means the devotee, the person who shows devotion to something. That means there are duality in the sense that devotee and the object of devotion. So the very term devotion shows duality in itself. The object of devotion must be something other and higher than the devotee. Of course, the object of devotion must be higher. As I mentioned earlier, that the personal Godhead must be superior, must be higher than the person, than the devotee. Otherwise, none of the attitudes like submission, reverence, love, etc., stated above can obtain when it seems that the very notion of devotion is incompatible with non-dualism, which ultimately denies the basic distinction between the devotee and the object of devotion. Just as saw, it is very much contrary to the idea of non-dualism, which shows that it is all comprehensive, it is holistic. So there should not be any place of duality, as we saw in the very term devotion. Now, let me say the basic principles of Advaita philosophy and the notion of devotion. As we have just mentioned, the etymology of devotion, the presuppositions of devotion, and now we'll see, after saying the basic principles of devotion, the basic principles of the philosophy, and then we'll be it will be very clear to us whether the first presupposition, the presuppositions of devotion, can be accommodated, or whether the presuppositions fit in the context of Advaita Vedanta, the basic principles of Advaita Vedanta. As you know, the Advaita Vedanta system, of which Shankaracharya is considered to be the first systematizer, admits only a single reality, that is Brahman, which is non-dual, Advaya, and bereft of attributes, Nirguna. Other realities such as the individual self, Jiva, universe, Jagat, and God, Ishvara, are either non-different from Brahman or or are superimposed on it, while the individual self and God are essentially Brahman associated associated it's the Brahman associated with its divine power called illusion or nescience, Maya or Avidya. The universe is erroneously superimposed on Brahman. So it seems that the Advaita philosophy cannot account for devotion as the means of obtaining liberation, moksha. Since knowledge or jnana of Brahman alone leads to liberation by nullifying the apparent distinction between the individual self and the Brahman. As we know, in the Advaita Vedanta, it shows only the knowledge of reality, the knowledge of Brahman only leads to mukti or liberation. That means jnana kaivallam. By jnana only we can obtain liberation. So, if we consider that devotion leads to liberation, then there should be a dichotomy. Now, say, in order to make our point more clearer, we should say the basic principles of Advaita Vedanta also can accommodate devotion in different angles. So, the admission of three levels of reality and of distinction in the Advaita system also very much permitted. Advaita metaphysics admits three levels of realities, shattas. The first one is empirical reality, that is Vyavaharika Shatta. Then we have apparent or illusory, Pratibhashika, and transcendental or absolute Paramarthika levels, where the world is empirically real as it appears only in common experience and negated in transcendental realization. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. And transcendental absolute Paramarthika levels, where the world is empirically real as it appears only in common experience and negated in transcendental realization of Brahman. So we know that there are three realities in Advaita Vedanta. First one is the Vyavaharika Shatta, second one is Pratibhashika Shatta, the first empirical or Vyavaharika Shatta, second one is illusory or Pratibhashika Shatta, and the third one is transcendental or absolute Paramarthika Shatta. As we mentioned, in the first or second, we find the presence of duality, though in the last stage, in the transcendental stage of Paramarthika Shatta, it is holistic. So, and the experience of a snake on a rope is confined to a man only at a specific time, and it is negated when the empirical rope is known. Then it is in Pratibhashika Shatta. In the transcendental reality, we see Brahman is only transcendentally real, as it is never negated in any experience, in any space and time. Thus, we know that Brahman is Tikala Avadita. Some distinctions stated in the scriptures may be admitted at the empirical level, and hence devotion and worship can be of much importance at this level. So, as you have seen, there are three realities in Advaita Vedanta. First one is empirical level, second one is illusory level, that is Pratibhashika Shatta, and the third one is transcendental level or Paramarthika Shatta. In the first level, that is in Vyavaharika Shatta, some distinction stated in the scriptures may be admitted. And hence, devotion and worship can be of much importance at this level. That means, in the first stage, which is in the Vyavaharika Shatta, the place and importance of devotion should be accounted for. Okay, So far as such activities purify the mind of the devotee. Well, if in order to purify the mind of the devotee, the presence of devotion is very much needed, which leads to Ghana, and Ghana only leads to Moksha. That is what Advaita says. So, and make it fit for receiving the knowledge that leads to liberation. Okay. So, all distinctions are, however, considered to be unreal from the absolute standpoint. So, the place of devotion is very much needed, is very much acceptable in the first level. That is the empirical level, where devotion makes fit the devotee to reach the goal, to, to acquire liberation, in the sense that devotion purifies the mind of the devotee, and it helps arising knowledge, which ultimately leads to moksha. So the place of devotion is very much there in the empirical level, if not in the transcendental level. Now, we'll see the admission of devotion in the tradition of Advaita with reference to Shankara's works. As I mentioned, the admission of devotion is there in the Rig Veda, which is the earliest testimony to Advaita Vedanta. We find reference to devotion even in the works of Shankara too. As we know, Shankara not only commented on the Pasthanatraya, Pasthanatraya, he also composed number of hymns praising the gods. So, the admission of devotion in the tradition of Advaita also is very much there, and we'll be just referring to some of the works of Shankara. Contrary to the charges of other theistic Vedantists like Ramanuja, Madhyavallabha, etc., against the Advaitins that the latter's basic principles cannot accord any place to devotion or a personal godhead, we find reference to worship or upasana, devotion, etc., not only in the Rig Veda, as I mentioned, it also very much there in the works of Shankara too. Even it is very much there in the works of post-Shankara Advaitins also, like Sureshwara, Sarvabhagatman, Vidyaranya Muni, Madhusudana Saraswati, Bhumananda Saraswati, Narayana Tirtha, etc. In addition to a number of topical texts, Pakarana Grantha, and hymns, stutras, Shankara's principal commentaries like those on the Brahma Sutras, Upanishads, and the Bhagavad Gita unmistakably point out his devotional spirit and fervor. While the Brahma Sutras discuss the nature of devotion in a few occasions due to the nature of the text itself, as we say, we'll see that if someone goes through, deals with the Prasthanatraya Bhashyas of Shankara, we won't find as much, we won't find the presence of devotion as much as we find, in the Bhagavad Gita, okay, as we find in the Brahma Sutra. Of course, the presence of devotion is very much there in the Upanishad commentary also, because Upanishad, the very nature of the Upanishads and the very nature of the Bhagavad Gita, the text of Bhagavad Gita, shows the presence of devotion. Though this much devotion we won't find, the discussion of devotion, we won't find in the context of Brahma Sutra. That is due to the very nature of the text itself. So, in Shankar's, in the yes. So we'll see, while the Brahma Sutras discuss the nature of devotion in a few occasions due to the nature of the text itself, and the Upanishads talk about devotion in the form of meditation. Though we may not find, like, the discussion on devotion as we find in in Bhagavad Gita. In Upanishad, the devotion is discussed in a form of dhyana or meditation or worship, upasana. Bhagavad Gita deals with devotion in an exhaustive manner. The majority of Shankara's comments on the Upanishads include indicate that both action, karman, and worship are necessarily devotional in approach and are therefore very important forms of devotion. Or, in other words, devotion is the necessary accessory of action and knowledge, in the absence of which the latter will not lead to their higher objective, that is, self purification and knowledge. So, we see in the commentaries on Prashna Upanishad 1, 2, then Kena Upanishad, of course, I am referring to the Bhashyas of Upanishad Bhashyas of Shankara, and Kena Upanishad 3.12, then Kena Upanishad 4.8. Then we find the reference to Upasana also in the Chandaka Upanishad 1.1.9, 1.1.10, 1.2.2, etc. Then Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 5.1.1.1, 3.8.9, etc. I mean, this is the reference to Shankara's commentary on the Upanishads. As the Chandaka Upanishad, Sutras bear a very few different references to the devotion. Much of it is to be inferred from the general spirit in which Shankara interprets these sutras. However, as in his comments on the Upanishads, Shankara in his commentary on the Brahma Sutras also treats devotion as complementary of action and meditation that lead to self-purification. As I just mentioned, that for him, devotion leads to self-purification, which leads to knowledge, and ultimately this knowledge leads to realization of Brahman. So, and finally, to the intuitive knowledge of self-realization, that means through devotion only, comes through knowledge. So you see the comments on the Brahma Sutras 1.1.1, 1.1.5, 1.1.2, 2.3.41, 3.2.5, 3.2.24, etc. have explicit reference to devotion. Though the text of the Bhagavad Gita prescribes all three means of liberation, namely action, devotion, and knowledge, and predominantly relies on devotion, Shankara, while commenting on it, like his other two commentaries on the Upanishads and the Brahma Sutras, accepts the utility of devotion as something conducive to the knowledge that ultimately leads to liberation. As we find it in the introduction to his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, then if we say the commentaries on Bhagavad Gita 2.11, 7.18, 8.22, 12.20, 10.10, 11.54, 1854 to 55, 1866, etc. Though I mean there are innumerable references to bhakti, but I've just just pinned down the crucial verses in the Bhagavad Gita. So as you see, even to commensurate, as per the basic principles of Advaita Vedanta, Shankara cannot refer to bhakti the way devotion is discussed by the dualistic Vedantins. So, in the three, what is called commentaries on the basic scriptures, that is the Prasthanatrayi versions, Shankara has discussed the presence of devotion, though following his basic teaching of Advaita Vedanta. And thus, the efficiency of devotion as a means of self-realization has been undoubtedly accepted in the tradition of Advaita, which considers Shankara's work as his foundational literature. So, If one goes through, if one deals with the Prasthanatraya Bhashya, we'll see Shankara has commented on all these, the Brahmasutra, Bhagavad Gita, and the Upanishads. And we'll see his discussion on devotion in his own, from his own, imitative way. That means following his, keeping the basic principles of Advaita Vedanta intact. Now, we'll be just referring to, of course, it will be like a bit clearer tomorrow in tomorrow talks, where I'll be just referring to in bit greater detail the Madhusudana Saraswati's one of of the theistic work for Gurartha Dipika. Today, just I'm referring to Madhusudana's approach to accommodated bhakti in his works. As you know, that Madhusudana is one of the uncompromising defenders of Advaita Vedanta in post-Shankara era. Madhusudana Saraswati and the inclusion of devotion in Advaita Vedanta. Madhusudana Saraswati belongs to 16th century, as I mentioned. He is an uncompromising defender of Shankara's non-dualistic Advaita Vedanta. He is also regarded as a foremost advocate of the inclusion of devotion within the Advaita system. A fact that is proved by his numerous works, both polemical and devotional, namely the vindication of non-dualism. The first one is Advaita Siddhi. Another one is Siddhanta Bindu, which is also translated as a drop of doctrines. Then we have Advaita Ratna Rakshana, which is translated as the defense of the gem-like non-dualism, Advaita Ratna Rakshana. These are the polemical works. Then we have the theistic works. The first one is Bhakti Rasayana, the elixir of devotion. The Bhagavad Gita Gurartha Dipika, which is translated as illuminated of the hidden meaning of the Bhagavad Gita. Then we have the Mahimstotra Tika. It is a commentary on the hymn to the glory of the Lord, Mahimstotra, Mahimna. Then we have the Bhagavad Purana, Prathama Shalaka Bhakha, the exposition of the first verse of the Bhagavad Purana. Then Holila Bhakha is a devotional works. It's the elucidation of the sport of Lord Hari. These are the works, these are the theistic works by Madhusudana Saraswati. Whereas we have just referred to Advaita Siddhi, Siddhanta Bindu, and Advaita Rakshana, Advaita Ratna Rakshana are the polemical works. So all the polemical works of Madhusudana, while enunciating the non-dualistic principles of Shankara Vedanta, admit the efficacy of devotion as a means of purifying the mind. But his emphasis on the sentiment of devotion is noteworthy when compared to the attitudes of other well-known exponents of Advaita Vedanta. That's why Madhusudana Saraswati as one of the exponents of bhakti in the tradition of Advaita Vedanta, particularly in post-Shankara era. Though we have mentioned the presence of bhakti is very much there in the earliest testimony, that means in the Rig Veda, as the tenets of Advaita Vedanta seem to be well-known exponents of Advaita Vedanta, as the tenets of Advaita Vedanta seem to be incompatible with the sentiment of devotion. In his devotional works, particularly in his Bhakti Rasayana or in the Gurartha Dipika, Madhusudana took up the challenging task of giving devotion a permanent place within the fundamental tenets of non-dualism and renunciation that are the hallmarks of Advaita Vedanta. Though we'll see in these two works, that is the Gurartha. It's a running commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, and the Bhakti Rasayana, which is based on the basic principles of Mahabharata Purana. We see the prominent place of bhakti is very much, is found, of course, incommensurate with the fundamental tenets of non-dualism and renunciation, which are the hallmarks of Advaita Vedanta teaching. So, let us just briefly discuss the place of bhakti in Advaita Vedanta, particularly in the Bhakti Rasayana and the Gurartha Dipika of Madhusudana Saraswati. The first one is Bhakti Rasayana, is a compendium of devotion, both in its cognitive and affective aspects, ever written by an Advaitin. Following the lead of Bhagavata Purana, as I mentioned, that Bhakti Rasayana is basically very much based on the teaching of Bhagavata Purana, where Bhagavata Purana considers bhakti is, Parama Purushartha. That means bhakti is much, much higher to the liberation itself. So, following the lead of Bhagavata Purana, Madhusudana in his work describes the definition of devotion, the means of attaining it, and its stages. Where he discussed, he gives a definition of devotion, the means of attaining devotion, and its various stages. According to him, devotion is the incessant flow of the modification of the mind of the devotee directed towards the Lord. That means incessant means is like, it's like you can say it's a continuous flow. It's a continuous flow of the modifications of the mind, which is the vittis of the devotee directed toward the Lord. When the mind of devotee melts by the spiritual disciplines undertaken by him, that means, you see, though Madhusudana is talking about devotion in Bhakti Rasayana, we find he's just in imitative way how he is discussing, the concept of devotion being an Advaitin. How he's telling that devotion is a constant flow of the modification of the mind of the devotee directed towards the Lord. When the mind of the devotee melts by the spiritual disciplines undertaken by him. As we say in the Advaitic tradition, we have that, that when you make yourself fit to achieve to attain liberation, then what? As you mentioned, that Shankara mentioned that in the followers of Shankara mentioned that bhakti purifies mind. That means it makes somebody fit to arise knowledge, which leads to liberation. So we find the help of devotion, the place of devotion is there in leading to liberation. Though we say that Jnana leads to liberation, but devotion is very much there in order to raise knowledge. So you see, again, Madhusudana maintains that while in the Advaita tradition, modification of the mind means the mind's assuming the form of the object of that modification, as you know, devotion is treated to be a mental state assuming the form of the Lord by the mind when it melts. It is there in Bhakti Rasayana 1.3. So it is also here also you see how Madhusudana takes up bhakti following the basic principles of Advaita Vedanta. Again, after mentioning this to be the characteristics of unqualified bhakti, that's Nirguna Bhakti, Madhusudana, taking support from the Bhagavata Purana, 11, 20, 31 to 11, 20, 36. He goes to extent of describing the path of devotion as the highest end of human life. That is Parama Purushartha, as I just mentioned, which seems to be a pure dualistic Vaishnava attitude and antagonistic to the teaching of Advaita Vedanta. So again, we'll be seeing, we'll be referring to the Gurartha Dipika, it's the hidden meaning of, the illumination of the hidden meaning of Bhagavad Gita. Here also I mentioned that the presence of bhakti is very much there, and we'll be seeing Madhusudana's innovative way to place bhakti in this tradition. As I mentioned, that Gurartha Dipika is running commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. Though the text of the Bhagavad Gita is full of theistic devotional orientation, Madhusudana's attempt to explain it from the non-dualistic point of view is noteworthy. While accepting the basic non-dualistic teaching that knowledge alone leads to liberation, as see in the Bhagavad Gita 3.1, he points out that devotion is absolutely necessary for removing the obstacles in the path of self-realization. As you mentioned, this is also spoken by the other Advaita writers. We find this reference to the introductory verse 7 of the Gurartha Dipika. Again, he goes on describing devotion as a link between action and knowledge in the introductory verse 6, 7, in a manner that is unusual for an Advaitin. Madhusudana maintains that devotion plays a role even after the attainment of liberation. Of course, it is very much unique. It is very much unique to Madhusudana. When he's saying that after liberation also, devotion plays an important role. So he holds that for a liberated while living Jivan Mukta, devotion remains spontaneous. The introductory verses 37 to 38. Here Madhusudana quotes the same Bhagavata Purana 1.7.10 as he does in Bhakti Rasayana 1.1. And that they, that means the liberated while living, that the Jivan Muktas, being purified through the asceticism of worship, develops a loving attitude towards the Lord. Is the commentary on Bhagavad Gita 4.10. That means you see, even being an Advaitin, Madhusudana says that after getting liberated or after obtaining liberation also, of course we are talking about the Jivan Muktas. Jivan Mukta develops a kind of loving attitude to, develops a kind of loving attitude towards Lord. In order to highlight supremacy of the path of devotion, Madhusudana describes devotion as both the cause and effect of the path of action and of the path of knowledge. Commentary on Bhagavad Gita 1866. That means what he's saying is highlighting the supremacy of the path of devotion by describing devotion as both the cause and effect of the path of action, and of the path of knowledge. The most striking point to note in this connection is that Madhusudana is bold enough to assert that he knows no higher deity, than Lord Krishna. As you know, it's very much there quoted that he told that Krishna Param King of Tattvam. I don't know any other higher deity than Lord Krishna. So for him, the Lord Krishna, which is the supreme Godhead of the Theistic Vedantins, concluding parts of the commentaries of the Bhagavad Gita 15, even in the chapter 18, the concluding part of the Gurartha Dipika, this verse is very much there. And as you know, this verse is abruptly there in the Advaita Siddhi also, which is considered to be in the magnum opus of Madhusudana. It's a highly polemical work. The same assertion is there in Advaita Siddhi 2.7 also. So thus, these two works, in addition to other works of Madhusudana explicitly emphasize the efficacy of devotion even in Advaita Vedanta philosophy. So far we have seen the presence of devotion is very much there in the Rig Veda, which is the earliest testimony to Advaita Vedanta, the teaching of Advaita Vedanta. Even the presence of devotion is there in the works of Shankara. And of course, we have just mentioned to, we have just referred to the prominent post-Shankara Advaitis like uh, Sureshwara. Also, Sureshwara could be the contemporary Shankara. And then Madhusudana Saraswati, Narayana Tirtha, Brahmananda Saraswati, Vidyaranya Muni, etc. And then we have mentioned about Madhusudana's works also. As I mentioned, the Madhusudana was, on one hand, he was a Dahyat Advaitian. In another hand, he was a great Bhakta too. So in his polemical work, that is Advaita Siddhi, Siddhanta Bindu, and Advaita Rakshana, we find both explicit and implicit reference to Bhakti and finished mystic works like Bhagavad Purana Prathama Shloka Bhakya, Bhakti Rasayana, Manustattva Tika, then Manustattva Tika, then Manustattva Tika, Bhagavad Purana Prathama Shloka Bhakya, Bhakti Rasayana, and other texts of Gratha we find explicit reference to Bhakti. So these are the works written by the Advaitins show that the place of Bhakti is very much there in, in the tradition of Advaita Vedanta too. Of course, it is not only just our argument to substantiate our views. Then the very works of the prominent Advaitins show that Bhakti plays an important role in the teaching of Advaita Vedanta too. Let me just briefly discuss some point in relation to the place of Bhakti, because it will be discussing this a bit in greater detail tomorrow. We've seen that, as you know, that in the field of Vedanta, particularly not only in Vedanta, in the theistic schools of Indian philosophy, we see there are three means of attaining liberation. As I just referred to the Bhagavad Gita, where it is very much there, the place of action, the place of devotion, and the place of knowledge. That means there are three ways of attaining liberation. That is karmanish, karma, that is action, then devotion, bhakti, and knowledge, jnana. That means there are three ways, there are three means of attaining liberation, and it is very much there in Bhagavad Gita. So, if bhakti is one of the means of attaining liberation, we'll see how the devotion, the bhakti marga, leads to liberation incommensurate with the basic principles of Advaita Vedanta too. So, we see one of the let me support this point. Let me substantiate this point with the observation of one of the famous contemporary scholars named Sonita Gupta from Oxford. She mentions, in Advaita Vedanta, the concept of liberation admitted in the Advaita Vedanta in general and by the Madhusudana in particular may be pertinent. How? If liberation, as you know, the concept of liberation, why? If the teaching of Advaita Vedanta is that I am none other than Brahman, and the Brahman is equivalent to the Jiva, or the vice versa. So where is the place of what is the place of bhakti, or what is the the place of even what is called liberation itself, because we are already liberated. How? So that scholar says in Advaita Vedanta, liberation is not the resultant state that a jiva should attain. It is not that you are pursuing to be liberated. No, it is not a resultant state that somebody is seeking for. According to this school, liberation and mukti or moksha is an ever accomplished fact. So liberation is an ever accomplished fact. It is nothing but Brahman itself. It is the revelation of absolute bliss, absolute cessation of misery, which precedes liberation. It implies the blissfulness of liberation, and Jiva aspires to achieve it for that bliss. So, Vedantic moksha or liberation is thus not mere cessation of misery, it is absolute bliss. Madhusudana maintains that liberation is in fact identical with one's own real self, Atman, which is integral, all blissful, non-dual consciousness. It is pure and non-dual consciousness. So we'll see, in consonance with Professor Gupta's observation mentioned above, we'll see how the concept of liberation and the meaning of attaining it is propounded by the Bhagavad Gita and as explained by Madhusudana Saraswati in the Gurartha Dipika. So just to mention that we have referred to the Gurartha Dipika briefly, and the Bhakti Rasayana by Madhusudana. There we saw that the place of bhakti plays an important role in these 2 years, particularly 2 works particularly. Though I mentioned that place of bhakti, the role of bhakti is very much there in the works of Shankara, in the earliest testimony of the Vedanta, that is Rig Veda, and in the works of Pushta Shankara Devatins like Madhusudana Saraswati. So see, particularly in the Gurartha Dipika, which is the commentary on Bhagavad Gita by Madhusudana, you see the nature of liberation as upheld by the Bhagavad Gita and the Gurartha Dipika. We'll see that. But you see, as I mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, there are 3 ways of attaining liberation, which is Karma Marga, then Bhakti Marga, and Jnana Marga. So Bhagavad Gita talks about 3 ways of attaining liberation. To highlight this point, the last one, the last stage of attaining mukti, which is, and the second one you can say, Bhakti Marga. If you think that Jnana Marga is the last one, the Karma, then Bhakti, then Jnana, then you see the nature of liberation, how the nature of liberation is upheld by Bhagavad Gita and the Gurartha Dipika, which is a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. As I mentioned, in Advaita Vedanta, liberation is not a resultant state, as Professor Gupta mentions, because you are already liberated. If you are identical with Brahman, if the Jiva is identical with the Brahman, then there cannot be any effort to achieve to attain liberation, because we are already liberated. So only the thing is that why the seekers are not able to understand that I am identical with Brahman due to avidya or adhasya. So what he does, he aspires to seek the supreme bliss which he lacks due to avidya or ajnana. And so in that case, the liberation is nothing but attaining the supreme bliss, which is Brahman, which is the integral and all blissful and non-dual consciousness. So it is pure and non-dual consciousness. See, that in the Shankara, for Shankara, liberation is the state of identity with Brahman by the individual self. He says, Brahma Bhavascha Makshaha. In his Brahmasutra Bhashya 114, he says, liberation is the state of identity with Brahman. Brahma Bhavascha Makshaha. Do you see, in the Bhagavad Gita states that liberation is the supreme goal of human life, Parama Purushartha, but it does not give the details of its nature. So this idea is envisaged there in different contexts. In the verse, let me just point out some of the verses of Bhagavad Gita where the concept of liberation is taken up. Then it will be a bit helpful for us to understand how Madhusudana, being an Advaitin, he talks about liberation. Though we mentioned that liberation is not a resultant state in Advaita Vedanta. So in Bhagavad Gita 4:31, 524, 824, 1330, 1850, etc., it is described as reaching Brahman, or in some verses like Bhagavad Gita 4.9, 7.23, 8.7, 8.15, 16, then we see the 9th chapter, 925, 928, 934, then again in the chapter 10, we see 10:10, 11th chapter 11:15, then chapter 12, the 4th verse, 1855, 1865, 68, etc. It talks about liberation as reaching Lord Krishna, that is being fit to become Brahman, or being fit to become non-different from Lord Krishna. So the Bhagavad Gita describes various means for attaining this liberation. The first one we say in 4.9, we see it mentions that liberation can be obtained through knowledge. Through action, we just pointed out some of the verses. 5.2 to 6 discuss that liberation is obtained through action. Then again, through a combination of knowledge and renunciation of action, that is Gana Karma Samuchaya, in Bhagavad Gita 9.28 to, again we see in chapter 12, verse number 12, then we see there is also obtained, liberation also is obtained through devotion, which is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita 8.22, etc. Then is also mentioned that through the grace of Lord, of course it is nothing but the second stage, that is called Bhakti Marga, that through the grace of Lord also liberation is obtained. It is referred to in the verse 1856, 62, etc. As regards the nature of liberation, the Bhagavad Gita describes, we have just mentioned contemporary scholars who mention that liberation is not a resultant state for which the seeker aspires for. What he aspires for? He aspires for something. What he aspires for? The bliss, which is nothing but the Supreme Brahman, the Supreme Reality, the Supreme Consciousness. And he's not able to identify himself with Brahman. How? Due to avidya and ajnana. So liberation is nothing. It is not nothing like a separate thing to be achieved. So as regards now, contrary to this view, you'll be seeing how the nature of liberation is talked about in Bhagavad Gita 2. As mentioned, the nature of liberation, the Bhagavad Gita, with regard to the nature of liberation, the Bhagavad Gita describes it as a state beyond death, a release from the sickness and separation of birth, a dwelling from where no one comes back, as you know. Jadgataka Nivartanti, in chapter 15. It is the supreme end, a state of the greatest accomplishment. That a Gyanin or a Bhakta is viewed as equally capable of reaching this state according to the Bhagavad Gita. It's clear from its various verses. That means what? A Gyanin or a Bhakta is viewed as equally capable of attaining liberation. That means a Bhakta also can attain liberation as much as a Gyani also can. While it asserts that it is only through devotion to Lord Krishna that he can be reached. It is also uttered by the Lord himself that Gyanin is Gyanin is his own self. In Bhagavad Gita 7:18, we see he mentioned Gyani is nothing but my own self. Again, in one context, it is said that the devotee, having attained identity with the Lord, goes beyond birth and death. In chapter 14, verse number 2. Thus, the Bhagavad Gita unequivocally asserts that a Gyanin or a Bhakta becomes fit for liberation. So, as I mentioned, the Bhagavad Gita, there are the Bhagavad Gita talks about three means of attaining liberation. That is the Karma Marga, Bhakti Marga, and Jnana Marga. So, in commensurate with this view, Bhagavad Gita mentioned supports that a Gyanin or a Bhakta becomes fit for liberation. So, in another context, also we say the Bhagavad Gita holds liberation to be the supreme domain of the Lord, on reaching which there can be no return to any earlier stage. In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15:6, we see. As to the practice of Jnana Yoga, it is said that the enlightened being, having been freed from the bondage of rebirth, reaches the state beyond any affliction, 2.51, etc. Further, it is said that on account of their sins being washed away by knowledge, the seekers of liberation attain the state of no return. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5:17, you see. Regarding the practice of Bhakti Yoga, it is uttered by the Lord himself that on reaching him, the seeker attains the highest perfection and doesn't return to the state of birth, which is the impermanent abode of suffering. We find it mentioned in chapter 8, 15 verses, etc. The Lord also says that though all states, including the world of Lord Brahma, are such that those who have to be born, those who them have to be born, once the Lord is reached, there is no question of rebirth. As I mentioned, it is there in chapter 8, verse number 16, etc. It is held that by the observance of Bhakti Yoga, the seeker attains the Lord alone. As you know, it is very much the word in Sabudharman Parityajya Mamakam Sharanam Bhojo. In chapter 18, verse number 65, 66 is there. Though devotion, the devotee, through devotion, the devotee knows the Lord in reality and consequently enters him forthwith. It is mentioned in chapter 18, verse number 55, etc. So, all these passages, as you have mentioned, when referred to Bhagavad Gita, show that the supreme goal to be reached is to attain the Lord, the Supreme Self, since the individual self, united with the Supreme Self, overcomes bondage. So, besides these references, there are a few statements too in the Bhagavad Gita which imply that Jiva, on being enlightened, reaches the state of Brahman. That means it merges with Brahman. Such a state is known as Brahma Bhava or Brahmi Sthiti in Bhagavad Gita 272, etc. The Bhagavad Gita also declares that one who is steadfast in knowledge, that means Sthiti Pragya, arrives at this stage to Brahmi Sthiti. Bhagavad Gita 22, 54, 255, etc. refer to this view. Attainment of the state is taught as the Brahman or becoming Brahman, Brahma Bhuvaya by the Sikar is also indicated in Bhagavad Gita 5:24 to 26. Then we see chapter 14, verse number 26, chapter 18, verse 53, etc. Together with the above mentioned verses in the Bhagavad Gita, the verses 13.3, 12, then 18, then again chapter 14, verse number 19, then we find chapter 18, chapter 8, verse number 23 to 26, then again chapter 13, verse number 12, etc. of the Bhagavad Gita may also look into, in this connection. So where the, where how somebody becomes, Brahma, becomes Brahman, like, with the attaining, attaining the knowledge. Of course, here with the attaining the knowledge in the sense that you mentioned that here, of course, attaining knowledge also, that is also how when you becomes Brahman, that means what? You are liberated, and in order to become Brahman, bhakti also, the devotion plays a role. So these are the just general views I have just mentioned how liberation is viewed in the Bhagavad Gita. Of course, it is briefly I have just mentioned, and in this context we have just referred to some of the verses. Then we have seen that Bhagavad Gita talks about liberation as having been obtained through different ways, that is Karma Marga, that Bhakti Marga and Jnana Marga. But in order to support our view that devotion can be accommodated in the context of Advaitic teachings, we have just, referred to those verses, those places of Bhagavad Gita where devotion plays an important role in terms of obtaining liberation. So this reference to the Bhagavad Gita and our earlier discussion where place of bhakti plays an important role. The presence of bhakti is there. From the beginning of Rig Veda to the contemporary, to the post Shankara Advaita works, we find that bhakti also is also a conducive way to obtain liberation. Though we find that mukti only, following Advaitic teaching, can be obtained through knowledge, but devotion purifies devotion. Devotion defeats somebody to arise knowledge, and which ultimately leads to liberation. So, with this, just we have just given a brief outline that the basic principles of Advaita Vedanta can accord to devotion in its epistemic level. In the tomorrow's talk, we'll be just making it a bit clearer. We'll be just referring to, as I mentioned today, referring to the some of the important portions of Madhusudana's Gurartha Dipika, which highlights that devotion is as much important in respect of obtaining liberation as it is relevant in the context of Jnana. As I mentioned, that Jnana is the ultimate end to, or ultimate means, essentially, ultimate means to attain liberation in Advaitic thought. Thank you.
Niranjan ji, we still have some more minutes left, so you could still continue today's session if you have some more points to make. Niranjan ji, am I audible?
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, yes, I can hear you. Am I audible?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, yeah. So I was saying that we still have some more minutes left, so you could still carry on the
Oh,
session
fine.
later.
Now, I was just thinking whether do you have any question or any clarification?
Yes, yes, I do have some questions. So if you had some
Okay.
points, you could.
So I thought that, yeah, I'm saying that 8 minutes are left. So I thought just if there is any clarification or any question. Of
Yeah.
course, we'll be just dealing with thing with better detail tomorrow.
Okay, okay,
Okay.
okay. So I do have some
In today's
questions.
talk, just as I mentioned,
Yeah. So you were.
I've given just a preliminary view. Yeah.
Yeah, correct, correct. So you were saying that even after liberation, that one has attained jnana, bhakti is still important. You mentioned that point.
Sorry, just a minute. It's not audible.
Okay.
Yes, please.
So you mentioned that even after
Please,
liberation,
can you repeat? Yeah.
yeah, that is even after liberation, that is attaining jnana of oneness, still the bhakti is important. You mentioned that point. So I couldn't understand how even after attaining that supreme reality, how can
Yeah.
bhakti be still relevant? Because there is no bhakta and bhakti division in that.
Yeah, as I mentioned, that there is this view is very much there. Madhusudan has borrowed this view from Bhagavad Purana. Okay, I can just refer to that verse. Just a minute.
Okay.
As you mentioned, yeah, it seems to be a bit unique, as far as Madhusudan is concerned. No other Advaitins, no diehard Advaitin will say that after obtaining liberation also, bhakti is needed. Okay, just a minute. I
Okay.
just go to that Bhagavad Gita, that verse. Madhusudana had just taken from the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, sorry, Bhagavad Purana. Madhusudana mentioned. Yeah, see,
Yeah.
yeah, you see here, he mentioned that here in the introductory verse 37 to the Bhagavad Gita commentary, he mentioned जीवन मुक्ति रसायन्तु न भक्ते फलकल्पना अदृष्टत्वादिवत् एषं स्वभाव भजनम हरेः. So he mentioned that after getting liberation also, that means in Advaita Vedanta, which is called Jivan Mukti. It's not. I'm not talking about the Vidya Mukti, when that your the body falls off.
Yes.
He's mentioned. He's just you see this is the his speciality, his uniqueness to accommodate bhakti is mentioned that adhishtutadit. See, like Jivan Mukti Rasayam na bhakti phal kalpana. Adhishtutadi but esham swabhava bhajanam harehe. So he mentioned that after attaining liberation, I mean when you become Jivan Mukti also, you develop kind of attitude to worship Lord. Okay, so yeah, Atmaram Atmaramascha Munah Nirgunanta Apukrokame Kurban Kurbanto haituki bhakti, bhakti iti bhaktim ittam bhaktim ittam bhuta guna hari. See, this is also, I mean, this reference to, this is, I think, it's very much, this reference is from the Bhagavad Purana. So, as you see in the introduction to Gurasa Dipika, even in the Bhakti Rasana, if you just, I don't have the Bhakti Rasana here in front of me, so I can see that, as I mentioned in the Bhagavad Purana, that bhakti is considered to be the Parama Purushartha. Even it is much, much higher than the liberation itself. So, Madhusudana, in his unique way, he mentions that though you are liberated, liberated, living liberated or Jivan Mukta, you develop a kind of attitude, loving attitude to worship Lord. Okay. So, of course, it seems to be a bit contrary to the basic principle of Advaita Vedanta. But we see, if we see that, I could be a Jivan Mukta, okay, but it doesn't mean that I am a diehard, like, or I am a, like, you can say, a dry, what is called, that's Shushka Bhakta or Shushka Advaitin. So it means what? As I mentioned, for him, bhakti is nothing but the reflection of the modification of mind when the mind is melted. And see, when he said that, where in that melted mind, that means the melted mind assumes the form of Brahman. So when the melted mind assumes the form of Brahman, that means the modification of the mind assumes the Brahman of assumes the form. It assumes the form of Brahman. That means what? Here he wants to show the relation between all the place of bhakti, okay, in attaining liberation, or quote unquote in like you must say in mingling, or you can say to become with the Meditram Brahman. Okay. So I think, like, in order to support this view, like he mentioned, and this verse, that Jivan Mukti Dashayam tu na bhakti he phalokalpana advishtutad advishtutad adi but esham sabhava bhajanam harehe Atmaramaschimunah nirvanta aprukrame kurbanto vituki bhakti ittam bhuta gune harihi. So this, like 37 and 32 verses to the introduction explicitly say that even after getting liberation also, even in the state of Jivan Mukta also, bhakti plays an important role. Even in the commentary of Brahmananda Saraswati, Brahmananda also supports this view. That in the state of liberation also, after getting liberation also, when you are mukta also, you are prone to worship Almighty, the so-called personal Godhead, that is Ishwar.
Yeah, so my question would come to this. So after liberation, hello, am I audible or not?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay, so my question is, to worship, to give bhakti, there should be a separate entity from you to offer some bhakti. So it is separate from you. So then only you can offer, then only you can pray and do bhakti. So after liberation, there is no two-ness here. There is only oneness. So to whom do you give bhakti, or to whom do you do you pray? You mentioned that bhakti is still relevant after liberation. So I couldn't, get my mind together with that point exactly.
That is as I told. Like the view, this Bhagavad Purana view, that if bhakti is considered to be the Parama Purushartha, okay, as I mentioned, the Bhagavad says that bhakti is the Parama Purushartha. That means it is much, much higher than the liberation itself. And in the contrary, in Advaita Vedanta, as I mentioned, that liberation is not a resultant state. Okay, and somebody in Advaita Vedanta by saying that it is not that a seeker is aspiring for liberation; he is already liberated. As you mentioned that, okay, if I am already liberated, then how can I go for devotion, or how can I, express my
There is no
ambitions, or I mean, like what?
separate
Yeah.
entity from you.
So yeah, so that means, yeah, as you mentioned, that if I am liberated, okay, if I am one and same with Brahman, so there is no question, I mean, of duality. I mean, there is no question of devotion, and or I mean, there is no question of devotee and the object of devotion. So I mentioned that. See, if you just consider that Madhusudana's that definition of bhakti, the way he defines the term bhakti, as I told you, Madhusudana in one hand, he is a great Advaitin, Dayat Advaitin. Okay, so at the beginning of Gurartha Dipika, Madhusudana pays his obeisance bhakti, his pranam to Shankara. Then he mentions in like each and every word of Shankara's commentary on Bhagavad Gita, I'll be just shedding a new light. So it doesn't mean that he is shedding new light. That means to be like, to be deviated from the tradition. Okay, but we can say that he tries to make it more explicit. Okay, what Shankara wanted to convey. So of course, in some of the places he disagreed. Apparently, he disagreed with Shankara, but with much humility. That means, as I mentioned in the beginning, that he kept the Advaitic path intact, but at the same time, he was, like he didn't, restrain himself to express his adoration, to express his love to Almighty. That's why, so that up-quoted verse, as you know, that Bungshi Vibhushita Karat, Namunirada Bhat, Pidambara Sundarat, say where he just describes Lord Krishna is nothing but the embodiment of Supreme Self, Brahman. So we have to just, I think, like we have to understand this point from bhakta who is a, I mean, Advaita Bhakta, you can say, like, who is the Advaitin at the same time greater Bhakta. So if somebody says no, like, we cannot place, we can give a place to Bhakti in the tradition, then also I think it is bit like, if you, in order to be a Gyani also, even in order to be a, what is called, I've been the follower of Karma Marga also, someone should imbibe bhakti first. If I don't have a kind of adoration, kind of love, okay, I cannot have, I cannot acquire knowledge. I cannot, what is called, put effort to, what is called, to to execute any action. So I find that in that, context only, we have to understand Madhusudana's view that bhakti is very much required to arise knowledge. And of course, as I mentioned, that Shankara explicitly mentioned it in the introduction to his Bhagavad Gita commentary, that that bhakti or the karma also is required to, for the purification of the mind, and where that knowledge arises and knowledge leads to liberation. So I think, like, we have to understand this point only, I mean, from this point of view.
I mean,
So
there
not
is
as
no
a, like,
doubt that
as a Dayat Advaitin, no, so there is no, of course, there is no place of duality.
yeah, I mean, there is no doubt that
Yes.
devotion has no place. Devotion definitely has a place. It definitely plays a major role in a seeker's journey towards the one reality. Yeah, and also you were saying that bhakti is also means to knowledge. But isn't it that only the Vakya Jnana is the means to knowledge or the realization of the self?
Please repeat it, please.
Yeah, you mentioned that bhakti is means to knowledge. But isn't it only Vakya
Yeah,
Jnana?
no, but yeah,
Isn't it only Vakya Jnana can relate it? I mean, Vakya Jnana can impart the knowledge, and later he realizes that he is the self.
yeah, no, that is very good. That's we say that Upanishadic, I mean that as you said that Bhakti Gana, the Sruti Gana also leads to knowledge. Okay, but here, as you see in the as you mentioned in the beginning of Shankara's commentary in the Bhagavad Gita, you see here uh, Shankara mentions that sorry, just a minute.
Sure,
I was
sure.
just referring to Shankara. Uh, yeah. See here in the I mean Shankara's commentary in the Bhagavad Gita, we see here Shankara mentions that yeah, see Nivritti Dharma Jnana Vairagya Lakshanam Grahaya Grahamasa Divido hi Vaidika Dharma Pravritti Lakshana Nivritti Lakshanascha. So, तत्रैक जगतः स्थिति कारणम प्राणिनाम साक्षात अभ्युदय निश्रेयस हेतु यह स धर्मः ब्राह्मण आदि या ब्राह्मण आदि then yeah brahmanadi be nirvi rascha asrayam avishcha sreyo artha abhi yeah अभिरनो अभिरनिष्टिमान दीर्घेन कालेन अनुष्ठान अनुष्ठतीनां काम उद्भवादीयमान विवेक विज्ञान हेतुकेन धर्मेण अभियुमाने धर्म प्रवर्तमाने च धर्मे जगतः स्थिति परिपि पालयुः स आदिकर्ता नारायण ख विष्णुर्धो अस्य ब्रह्मणः तस्य रक्षणार्थं देवकां वसुदेव आदेशेन कृष्णः किल संभुव. See here, just you see here, you see when Shankara talks about Nivritti Dharma Lakshan, Bhakti Dharma Lakshan, so what he says, the both the like you need that Nivritti Dharma, which is the basic, the principle of, as I mentioned, the renunciation, or the, I mean, sannyasa, or what is called this Vairagya is the hallmark of Advaita Vedanta. At the same time, Shankara also talks about that Pavritti Lakshana Dharma, that both the Pavritti Lakshana Dharma and the Nivritti Lakshana Dharma are required to to obtain the ultimate goal. As you mentioned that Bhakatha Gana or the Upanishadic knowledge leads to liberation in the sense that it leads to knowledge, and that knowledge leads to liberation. So, but as far as that, I mean that Advaitins, because you can say like Advaitins, the Bhakta Advaitins, for them, how then bhakti plays an important role. He say that, as he mentioned here, he said that karma purifies mind. Okay, when karma purifies mind, of course you have to execute action. So if karma purifies mind, it imbibes a sense of bhakti, I mean adoration, and in that state of mind, knowledge arises, and ultimately this knowledge leads to bhakti. So here you can say, if you see that, you cannot say like a Dayat Advaitin that bhakti is leading to liberation, but you should say, as Shankara mentioned, that bhakti, I mean both karma and bhakti are conducive to, I mean, arising knowledge, which ultimately leads to liberation. So, of course, Shankara cannot say that only karma leads to liberation. Shankara cannot say that Jnana Karma Samuchaya is the cause of liberation. He he could only say that karma and bhakti are required, or as a helping, you can say, the means, to arise knowledge, which ultimately leads to liberation. So I think, I mean, like in this context, only we have to understand, I mean, like how karma and bhakti play an important role. Okay.
Yeah.
So here, see this. Of course, I was not prepared to. The thing, so many things are there to refer to, and I feel like, see here, see here's a like, when he mentioned that, again Shankara is mentioning that way. तस्य गीताशास्त्रस्य संक्षिप्तः प्रयोजनं परम निश्चयेश सहेतुकस्य संसारस्य अत्यंत अत्यंत उपलक्षणम तच्च सर्वकर्म संन्यास पूर्वक पूर्वकात् आत्मज्ञान निष्ठारूपद धर्मद भवति. सेकंड, ततमेव गीतार्थ धर्म धर्मम उद्देश्य भगवत भगवत भगवते च उक्तम स हि धर्मः स पर्याप्त ब्रह्मणः पदवेदनम इत अनुगीतासु. He mentioned that किंचन अदपि तत्रैव उक्तम नैव धर्म न च धर्म न चैव हि शुभाशुभि यो सद अकशेन सद एकाशेन लीनस् तुष्णि किंचित. I mean, is the quote from other places. ज्ञानम सन्नास लक्षणम इति च यद्यपि च अन्ते उक्तम अर्जुनाय सर्वधर्मान् परित्यज्य मामेकं शरणं व्रज इति. So here, see, like again he mentioned that अभ्युदर्थ अपि यः प्रवृत्ति लक्षण धर्म वर्णाश्रम वर्णाश्रमश्च दृश्य विहितः स च देवादिस्थान प्राप्ति हेतु रूपी. Then like it goes this way, you will see then the place of action and the place of bhakti also, like, are nothing but the conducive, are helping means to attain, knowledge, which leads to liberation. As I mentioned, that is very much there. Only, as you see, that only Shruti Gana only the Bhakti Gana only, leads to liberation. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I thought tomorrow I will just discussing thing, and I'll be giving the, as to prepared to. The book was there. Just I never thought that I will just referring to this. Then I could be a bit prepared.
Okay. Thank you, Niranjan ji. Thank you so
Fine.
much. Yeah, viewers, tomorrow also Niranjan ji will be speaking about Bhakti in Advaita Vedanta. Please tune in at the time, and Niranjan ji will be elaborating on these concepts with reference to Madhusudana Saraswati exclusively tomorrow. And if you have any questions, please do post them tomorrow, and we will take up those. Thank you, Niranjan ji. Okay, we'll be ending this session now. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.